Hey guys, it's Lauren from the Express Lane, and today I have a very special guest with me. This is Crystal, and she is one of our employment specialists in our St. Croix Falls office. Thanks for coming on the channel today.
Yeah, hi Lauren. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here this week.
So a fun fact that you might not know about Crystal is that she actually started out at Express as the St. Croix Falls office recruiting specialist.
Yeah, I actually just moved into my new role a few weeks ago as an employment specialist.
So since you're the first recruiting specialist that we've had on our channel, could you explain to us a little bit more about the recruiting specialist role and what some of your job duties were when you were in that role?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. As a recruiting specialist, I spent a lot of the time on the phone doing interviews with new and returning associates, as well as a lot of time on social media, seeking out those new applicants for Express.
Okay. So I pulled the numbers specifically for the St. Croix Falls office since you started in July of last year, and you did over 350 interviews since then, which is a lot of interviews. So I'm guessing that you have a few tips that you can share with us when it comes to interviewing.
Oh, I sure do. Today I'm going to talk all about interviewing over the phone or virtually with confidence.
Let's jump in. Let's start out in chronological order here. If you had to give your best tip for interview preparation, what would it be?
I would say my best tip for interview preparation would have to be know what you're applying for. Carefully review the job description so you know all the details when you're interviewing with the employer. And as much as they want to know a lot about you during that interview, they're also going to want to know what you know about them.
So I know that a lot of people get sort of pre-interview jitters. I know I definitely do, for sure. I get very nervous before interviews. Do you have any tips of ways that somebody could kind of like help calm those pre-interview just nerves and be a little bit more comfortable and more confident when it actually comes time for the interview?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that you know yourself best, so I think the biggest tip I have is give yourself a pep talk. You know what's going to calm those nerves. And then, just go over what you're good at. Know your strengths going into that interview. Know how you're going to sell yourself to that employer.
So obviously with the pandemic, a lot of things changed, and employers specifically went from moving from in-person interviews to phone interviews and video interviews. Now, besides the actual location of the interview changing, what other things really changed moving from this in-person to more of a virtual setting?
Yeah, absolutely. In a virtual setting, there's a lot more flexibility as far as scheduling and who you're able to have in that interview process. You're able to connect with people all across the world on a virtual platform. There has also been some things that haven't been the best in the fact that things are a lot more laxed in a virtual phone interview. You're in a setting that you're very comfortable in, being in a location you've chosen, and that can get the best of us sometimes.
For sure. Yeah, I remember doing an interview over the phone and having one of my cats like come across the couch and like crawl into my lap, and I was trying to just keep it professional. So definitely been there.
Yeah, the distractions are real.
So since Express Employment Professionals specifically has moved to doing primarily phone interviews, I mean, we still do a few in-person interviews here and there, but it's mostly over the phone now. What would you say are your top 3 tips for somebody getting ready to complete a phone interview?
Yeah, absolutely. My top 3 tips would have to be 1, dress the part. Studies have shown that when you dress professionally, you speak professionally. And secondly, would be to test your equipment. Prior to doing a virtual or a phone interview, make sure that your camera and microphone are working. Nothing's worse than starting off on the wrong note when you can't get connected. And third would definitely be trying to limit distractions. Well, there are things you can control, like a loud truck driving outside your house, but you can lock the door to keep the kids out, or the cat.
So true. Now, with how many interviews that you've done, I'm curious to know, what do you think is maybe one of like the most telling interview questions? Like the interview question that when you get to an interview, you really know based on how somebody answers this question, they're gonna be a good fit, or they're maybe gonna be a not so good fit for the position.
I think one of the most telling interview questions has to be, how has your experience prepared you for this position? I think a question like this really opens the floor for you to talk about your experience, both professional and personal, and how that can relate to you being successful in your role.
Now, I remember being in college and hearing from both professors as well as our career counselors and career services that you should always have follow-up questions prepared to ask the interviewer when your interview is wrapping up. So I'm curious if you have a favorite that you like to ask when you've wrapped up interviews in the past.
Yeah, usually as an interviewee myself, I like to come prepared with two types of questions.
Okay.
One that's going to pertain to the position, like what can I expect on a day-to-day basis in this role, or who would I directly report to?
Okay.
And secondly, I like to ask something that kind of gets me information about the interviewer and the company that I'm interviewing for. Something along the lines of, well, what's your favorite part of working here? Or how would you describe the company culture?
And I guess a fun question, do you have any interview pet peeves that stick out?
Well, I think through all my interviews here at Express, I would have to say being underprepared is kind of a big pet peeve for me. Come prepared with your work history, ready to discuss. Be ready to talk about what you did in that role, whether or not you liked it. I need that kind of information about what you did. And also, if you need references for a position, let those references know you've used them. Nothing's worse than calling references and they're like, who are you talking about?
And we actually have a whole references video that we made that will leave linked up in the description box here as well as down below so that you can watch that video when you're done watching this one. So to wrap up the video, I am curious to know, what is the most memorable question that you've ever been asked as an interviewee?
I think the most memorable question I've ever been asked in an interview would be, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? And obviously I said teleportation because I'm in an interview and then I won't be late.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
What about you?
For mine, I specifically remember this because I was asked this question in my second round of interviews with Express, and it was a group interview, so I was already really nervous. And then when they threw this curveball question at me, I didn't know how to respond. But the question was, if your life was a book, what would the title of the book be? I still don't know if I have an answer to that one, and I honestly don't remember what I said because I was so nervous. But I think, you know, it's fun too that your question and my question were both kind of those curveball questions. I think it's fun to kind of like add those in sometimes to the interview and mix things up a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely lets you learn things that maybe a traditional interview question wouldn't.
For sure.
Well, that wraps up today's video. Part 1 of our series of Interviewing with Confidence. Be sure to hit the subscribe button to get notifications about all our future videos.
And we'll see you back here next Wednesday at 4 o'clock Central Standard Time, where we bring you even more tips to help you get your career in the Express lane.